Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we talk about critical issues in the blindness community. My name is Aaron Richmond. This episode of Aaron's Opinion, by the way, is copywritten by Aaron Richmond and Aaron's Opinion. And this episode, like all others, can be found in many places where you get a podcast, along with YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and even consider becoming a patron on my Patreon page. I would appreciate the support. As I usually say, tonight's guest is someone new. We're very proud and very pleased to be welcoming Ashley Escarino to Aaron's Opinion, the founder and I guess CEO of Vision Loss Solutions. She's blind. She's a YouTuber, and she really wants to get into YouTube. And I really want to know more about Vision Loss Solutions and your own vision loss story. So, how are you?
I'm doing well, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, you explained it in one of your messages, but why don't you tell the listeners so exactly, how you became blind in that part of your journey, and then we'll kind of walk towards, vision loss solutions and things like that. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so when I was in college, I worked in for a nonprofit that served people that were in low-income housing, and so we were to provide educational opportunities for the kids that lived in that community, and kind of like an after school where they could come and we would do homework with them and things like that. And so when and it's weird that it just happens to be in October, we decided we wanted to do something fun for the kids. And so we put on a haunted house for the kids. Well, the haunted house went great. The kids loved it. And afterwards we were going around and we were taking down all the decorations. And I had put some witches' hats hanging from the ceiling and I hung them with tape. Well, someone else had put thumbtacks in the ceiling to hold up the decorations, and I didn't know that. And so when I was going through and I'm just ripping them down, tearing them down, I pulled on it and the tack slingshot into my eye, and it severed the muscle that makes your eye dilate. And it happened so fast, and it made this really loud popping noise. And so I honestly thought I had been shot in the face, and I thought that for several minutes. And so when the injury happened, I went totally blind instantly, because I guess there was just so much swelling and so much blood that it just knocked out both eyes, because your optical nerves are tied together in the back, and so it knocked them both out. And so my sister was quick thinking, and it just so happened my eye doctor was not too far down the road, so she's like, quick, get in the car, let's go to the eye doctor really quick. And he just happened to be there. And so when I went in, he was like, oh my gosh, he hadn't seen anything like that. And so he goes, let me go call one of my good friends who happens to be one of the top ophthalmologists in the area, and he specialized in, I can't remember now, like the retina and other things. And so he called him for advice on what he should do with me, and the guy just happened to be driving by that area. He was going to dinner with his wife, so he just happened to be in the area. So he said, well, let me swing on by and I'll take a look at her. And this was fantastic, because I was in college and I didn't have health insurance. And so automatically I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for this? I mean, I know everyone can relate to that, and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so he got there and he looked at it and he was like, well, I'm going to give you some eye drops. And so that should help clear up, decrease the swelling. And hopefully in a couple of days, the blood will have settled down. Then we can really see and look and see what we're dealing with. And so they put me on these eye drops and they just tasted terrible. Like, it's weird, like when you put an eye drop in that you can taste it, but I could, and it just left a horrible taste in my mouth. And so I had to sleep at a pretty steep angle, and they're like, don't move, just lay in bed, because the more you move, your blood starts pumping through your body, and it will make the tear in your muscle worse. So just basically stay as still as you can and let that blood drain out. So probably about 24 hours after the injury, the vision in my one eye came back. And so I could see out of one eye. The other eye, I still couldn't see anything. And so I kept doing the eye drops, and I went and saw him. And he's like, well, for this type of eye injury, there's nothing we can really do. It's you just sit and hope and pray that the muscle heals and will grow back to the eye. They said it's rare that that happens, but it can happen. And so I was just like, oh, great. And so that's basically where I was. And what was terrifying is I was in college and I didn't even know they had anything like a disability department that would help assist you, you know? And so my grades started to plummet because I couldn't see, you know, the board. I was having trouble seeing to read. And so I was just having all these issues. And Aaron, I was in sign language. Isn't that terrible? I was taking sign language that semester. Oh my gosh. And, you know, I couldn't see anything. And so, and luckily for me, the muscle did grow back to the eye. And so now I'm not blind. I do have vision. And there for a year after that injury, I had to go and get the pressures in my eyes checked because they were just really high for a long time. And so, you know, and I was taking eye drops for that too. And so now I'm in a place where it's stabilized. And so I do have vision, but then I had health problems. And I don't even know if you want me to go into this, but I ended up having pancreatic cancer. They took out my pancreas. So now I'm a severe diabetic. And as you know, I'm sure a lot of diabetics end up having vision problems also. So that's kind of my connection to the visually impaired, I guess you could say.
Well, very excellent job and very, very interesting. You know, I mean, I'm someone who was born blind. I was born with glaucoma. 7 cornea transplants later, I have usable vision, but I'm still blind. And I cannot even begin to imagine how difficult it must be for someone to be an adult and to have to deal with losing their vision as an older adult. I mean, that's really, really interesting and really crazy. I mean, I've heard all sorts of stories of vision loss, everything from getting hit over the head with a brick to apparently you can do it by basically flicking a thumbtack in your eye hard enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a story. I believe you, by the way, but still, wow. Um, by the way, uh, did you ever take the doctor and his wife out to dinner and pay for it? Because, you know, she was probably late for her dinner.
Well, thank God they were really good people. And I wish I could have, but Aaron, you had to remember I was in college. I was poor. But I still am grateful for everything that they did for me. Now that I'm an adult, if I ever ran into them, I would gladly pay for their dinner.
There you go. Okay. It's very funny and very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's how you got into this community. Well, welcome. Know that this is as far as I'm concerned, or as long as you're talking to me or talking to Aaron's opinion, this is a welcoming community. And I want you to know that I am well aware that there are a lot of very strange and insensitive comments being made in a lot of the blindness groups around the Facebook community. I've gotten a lot of complaints from many people who have connected to my podcast and have spoken to me at length about this. So know that it's just part of the community, and you just have to understand that there's going to be some strange behavior on these groups. But I'm sure that you are more than used to that now. But still, I want you to be aware. The reason I'm telling you is someone else asked, is it my imagination that this is happening on Facebook? You know, people are saying weird things, Ashley, or they're just making these weird comments to other blind people in the blindness groups on Facebook that are supposedly, quote unquote supportive. No, it's not your imagination. Everybody else is complaining about it. So that's how that is. But one of the things that I one of the goals that I have for Aaron's Opinion is, as I said, I've been doing this for a year, podcasting, and very recently I've gotten into the YouTube, and just a couple days ago I got into the voice acting. So it's like I'm really, I really apply myself, and I really, really, really enjoy helping people from around the world. And I just enjoy helping you to tell your story. It's like being an author where I'm able to tell these different stories from, I mean, I've told every story. I've told a story from a blind retired correctional officer at a prison. I've had told a story from someone who's transgender. I've told a story from a blind model. I've told a story from someone from Nepal, Uganda, Gambia, England, Jamaica. And after this episode, you'll be added to my WhatsApp group that I'm sure you'll join, and then you can meet everybody. And it is a wonderful WhatsApp group, only for the guests of Aaron's Opinion, of course, and I'm the administrator, so it's a really positive group. But these these things happen for reasons to which we really have no idea. It's a very bizarre way to become blind, a very tragic, very sad way, of course, but it happened for some reason. Who knows? As Samuel Clemens says, there's only 2 days in your life that are important: the day you're born and the day you know why. So for some reason, you're supposed to be, philosophically speaking, that was going to happen philosophically. So now that this is life. And so next question.
Yeah.
So how'd you do in sign language?
So I barely squeaked by. I had an A, thank God, or I wouldn't have passed because my grades dropped so significantly that I ended up scraping by with a C, Aaron. Yes.
Okay. So what did you do after you graduated from university?
Okay, so after I graduated, and that I was almost a senior when that eye injury happened. And so that just got me interested. I kept thinking, well, what is everyone else doing that had a vision impairment? There has to be help out there, but I didn't know of any of them. And so it just piqued my interest. So I ended up looking into jobs, and I found a job it's called Recording for the Blind and Dyslexic, or that's what it was called in the day. I think now it's called Learning Ally.
Uh-huh.
And it provided audiobooks for people that were visually impaired.
By the way, I gotta hand it to Learning Ally. That is a company that I have used in university and through my education. And I want to tell you out there, if Learning Ally hears this, that your company has improved immensely. I have seen a lot of improvements in that company's customer service, especially at the end of my university days when I was using them a lot. I've noticed a lot of improvements and a lot of developments in that company. So it's a great company. But tell the listeners, from all over the world, where, if they haven't heard of Learning Ally, what does it do?
Okay, so Learning Ally specializes mostly in textbooks, educational text. And so they would take the books and they would have volunteers that would come and read the books for them and describe, say they're reading a science book. They would, describe the pictures, they would describe charts, graphs, and things like that. And that was before technology really took off. So students really depended on that service to be able to have access to their text. And I worked as a educational outreach coordinator. So I worked with the teachers in the schools and first made them aware that we existed if they had kids that were visually impaired, or sometimes people would use our books that were like dyslexic and had other issues, to make them aware of us, and then just kind of help bridge the gap between the studio and getting the audio recordings and then out to the people that needed them.
So that's really interesting. And I think as someone who's on YouTube now, I record as much as I can. I'm more and more interested in this industry of recording and basically content creation. So how does Learning Ally do that? How do they find people who are willing to sit down? It's quite difficult and read an entire book. How do they find volunteers, and how do they technically, get from point A to Z there? Tell us all about that.
Okay, well, I'm not sure how they do it currently, but about 10 years ago, how it would work is they already had, this is in Austin, Texas, so they had a very strong volunteer base in Austin, Texas, a wonderful community. And so they had set volunteers, and they would come in at certain days of the week and record up to 2 hours. So they had little sound booths. They would go in there, basically read for 2 hours straight. And then they would mark where they left off. The next volunteer would come in, and then they would just kind of pick up where they left off. And they pretty much, we had volunteers coming in about 10 hours a day, trying to knock these books out. And at the time, there was a bit of a lag. But when you think about all the manpower that goes into creating those audiobooks, I mean, it was really something amazing. And at the time, all the volunteers, that we love them to death. We laugh about it. Me and some people that used to get Learning Ally books, we laugh about it because most of the volunteers happen to be elderly. So you would be listening to one person's voice, and then it would switch all of a sudden, and then sometimes it wouldn't always be the most desirable voice. Especially if you say you're taking a class that's not the most interesting, and then you have kind of like a monotone voice, like reading to you. But it is so sweet. And so I know when I worked with the schools, they're like, well, do you have voice actors? Can't you get voice actors? Because at the time, that's when Kindle and all that stuff was starting to come out, and Audible.com and things like that. And they're like, can't you get voice actors? And I'm like, well, we're a nonprofit. We can't really afford, voice actors to come in, and we have such wonderful volunteers. But you would know more about this now, about how it's set up now. Because like I said, this was like 10 years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason why Learning Ally couldn't have had voice actors is those people who work for Audible, obviously it depends on the person. So when you're listening to an audiobook from audible.com, most of those people actually were actors in real life, and they got into the audio side just, for a side job, and it's extremely difficult. Your voice has to be just right. You have to put inflection. You have to, enunciate the syllables, and you really have to be able to project your voice in a way that makes it understandable all the time. So that's very difficult for most people. Most people don't have that voice. So that group of voice actors is a very, very small group. Now, many of them are recording from home in their home studios, and then they send up the audio files, through Dropbox, or they send it in that way, or through one of those file sharing services. But either way, some of those actors, have contracts, and they have to make, a lot of money for each recording. So that's how that works. Yeah.
I don't even know if the Austin studio still exists. I don't live in Austin right now, but I'm not sure if that studio is still there, because it used to be on Texas School for the Blind. And I'd be curious to know if they still have that location open.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember them being in New Jersey for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the headquarters are. They had a couple of different studios across the United States. In Austin, Texas had one. I think one was in Arizona, and I forget where some of the other ones were.
Right. I see. All right. Well, that's good. And then so after you did that, let's walk towards where you got this idea for Vision Loss Solutions, and tell us everything about what that is and what you do.
Okay, so when I left Learning Ally, I ended up getting a job in Amarillo as a vocational rehabilitation teacher for the state of Texas, for their DARS, the Division for Blind Services. And I absolutely loved that job. And so that's where kind of the teacher part, I got to go into people's homes. I worked with people from, say, age 8 all the way up until their 80s. And so it wasn't focused on where Learning Ally was more on educational materials. This focused more on, say, someone that might have lost their sight, and they're all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, I can't maneuver around my kitchen. I can't make meals for myself. What do I do? And so I would get to go into their homes and help them get organized and teach them how to do all these things non-visually, just so they can keep their independence. And I loved that job. It was just the best job I ever had. But when you work for probably any government agency, but for the state of Texas, they had such a high amount of people that they were trying to serve at one time. And there was, like, I was the only teacher in the whole panhandle. The next closest teacher was in Lubbock. And so that was like 2-hour drive. And so my territory was huge. And so sometimes I would teach people in their homes. And so sometimes I might have to drive 2 to 3 hours just to go visit one person, teach them, and then have to drive all the way back to Amarillo, depending on where they were located. And so it took a long time when you were waiting for services to be able to get a teacher out to you. And so that was one of the drawbacks that I saw, and I was like, that always weighed heavily on me, because you want to be able to get to people as quickly as possible, And so I noticed that. And then whenever we started a group called the Raising Canes in Amarillo, because one thing that I noticed is that when you lose your vision, and I know this happened when I had my eye injury, all of a sudden you're like very isolated, and it's a very lonely thing to experience. And so one thing I wanted to do is get people interacting with other people that had also lost their sight, because you're always going to learn the most from people that are living it as well. And so they'll say, hey, well, I cope with this by doing this, or I do this. And so I really wanted to set up a community of support, because a lot of times when I would go out and I would be, all gung-ho, like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to do XYZ, the person emotionally wasn't there yet. And so they were still having an adjustment issue and still coping with, what had happened, which is very understandable. But the state didn't really offer anything in the way of helping people deal with that grief, or helping them come to what, just being by their side, helping them get through that period. Because you almost have to, in my opinion, go through the grieving process, and be able to deal with all of that, and then the acceptance. And then once you get to the acceptance part, then you're more likely to say, okay, yes, I'm ready to start training. I'm ready to move forward. But when someone's not ready and they're trying to, force stuff on you, like, oh, we're going to do this XYZ, usually you're not able to make meaningful change then, because they're not ready for it. And so that was like one thing that I saw, and I was like, oh, I wish we could do better on the emotional side, because there was no help in that area. And then since I work for vocational rehabilitation, it was all about employment. Well, like I said, a lot of people were still, going through the emotional part of losing their vision. They weren't ready to accept training. And then we're trying to hurry and placing them in a job. And so there was one thing, I was like, I wanted to be able to help people without that requirement of you're working, we need to find you a job. And so there was just little things that while working in that job, I thought, you know what, if I was running this place, I would do XYZ, and I would improve it this way, and I would change it that way. And so that's kind of where the ideas came from. And then I got sick, and that's why I left that job, because when I got cancer, I had to move to Houston to get to MD Anderson. And so then when I was going there, I had to leave that job, and I wasn't able to return to being a vocational rehabilitation teacher, because there's so much driving involved with, going out to see your students. And with my severe diabetes, driving's difficult. Like, I had to really, plan out when I'm going to drive and check my blood sugars. So that wasn't really an option I was able to go back to. So then I was like, well, what can I do? Because I wanted to stick with working with the visually impaired community. And so then I was like, well, maybe I can start my own business and try to make those improvements that I hoped, and thought were lacking in the state services.
Yeah. And I think what you've said is extremely accurate. And this is a problem in every state struggles with this, for sure. Getting services to those who need, and getting the right services to the right people. It's a constant struggle, it seems. So, how did you go about creating vision loss solutions?
Okay, well, we've only been open for about 5 weeks now, and so
Ah,
we're still very new.
well, I'm okay. Well, then I'm really glad that
Yeah.
I'm really glad to be able to have this conversation because this is a really good way then for you to basically advertise and tell the world about what all of your goals are, what you would like to try to do, and maybe I can give you some, if you want, maybe some advice or
Oh,
ideas once I hear a
absolutely.
little bit more about kind of where you want to go. So try to explain if you want.
Okay. And I love your advice, and anybody that happens to be listening, if you have advice, shoot me an email. I'll take it anywhere I can get it. And so Vision Loss Solutions, with everything with COVID, eventually I would like to go out and be able to provide services in people's homes again, down the road. But right now it's not really feasible because right now we're more focused on probably seniors. However, we don't have any sort of qualifications. So like when you go to apply for services at the state, you had to meet a certain requirement of vision loss.
Okay.
Well,
No, I mean, I think right here, let's sorry for the interjection, but just to clarify, if someone's cited, they may not know exactly what you're talking about. I think what you mean, let's try to keep, we're kind of talking about two separate different issues. The first issue that you were saying is when you are a blind person and when you go to the state, in your case, the state of Texas, the great state of Texas, for services, it's yes, please explain that as you were explaining, you have to meet certain criteria under Texas law, let's say, to be able to obtain the services you need. Is that true?
yes, you have to have vision that's less than 200. Um,
20,
yeah,
20, 20 with a, so you have to have a visual acuity that is less than 2200.
yes. And
Okay.
then I forget what the field vision is. There's also
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So you right. So you need to meet those requirements. In my state, um, it had to be. I also had to be receiving SSI to obtain services. So there can be other technicalities, financial technicalities too, that are stipulated, and every state has different laws about it. That's why it's so complicated. So
yeah.
so for you though, okay. So then you set up um, Vision tr- Vision Training Solutions.
Yeah, vision loss solution.
Vision Loss Solutions. Sorry for that. Vision Loss Solutions. There are other companies with very similar names. Vision Loss Solutions. Um, and what did you need to do to get Vision Loss Solutions established and set up?
Well, on my end, I didn't know there were so many legal requirements that you had to jump through, and so it's all just been kind of a learning experience on my end. But to go back to my company doesn't have any requirements. You don't have to meet any sort of guidelines. If you're having any sort of vision issue and you're struggling, we can help you if you reach out to us and so anybody that needs help, we're willing to help. And so we have, we do online training, virtual training. We can train in technology. We can help with daily living skills. And then this week we're also launching our online store of low vision products and things like that. And we also are trying to have the social aspect that I kind of refer to that I think is missing in the state. So we have monthly free Zoom meetings. And so not really meetings, but kind of like just get-togethers where people just can come, meet other people that have vision loss and just kind of hopefully build friendships and build a social support network.
So good, so good. I especially like the last part. I think that last part is really, 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 really critical. Um, are people from outside of Texas allowed to reach out to you and participate in these meetings, basically these Zoom meetups?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Like, what if, like, what if I wanted to participate in a Zoom meetup? Am I qualified enough?
You are qualified. We'd have you as the featured guest. You could
I
come
would.
on and people would know you were going to be there so they could come ready with their questions.
I would be more than honored and more than happy to set up some sort of a summit where, if you want, of course we can work it out off the air. But how about this for an idea? How about at some point I come on to your Zoom meetup, and you have a featured guest that is a blind podcaster, that's me, and I can answer all of the questions that everybody wants to know. And then it would go both ways. I would promote vision loss solutions. I would, send out some, tweets, put up some public posts on my Facebook page, and then you would return, if you want, you would return it by then tweeting out about my podcast. And, we can do something like that, because that's really what I want to do with this podcast. I want it to be a podcast that actually helps someone else. So
Oh, absolutely.
I genuinely want to help you, and I am really, 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 really determined to help you about that. Hey, by the way, so what products do you have in the store?
In the store, we have like magnifiers.
All right, all right,
We have like cooking stuff because I enjoy cooking.
cool. What
And
cooking
so
stuff?
I was
Okay,
thinking,
well, this is really cool. So what cooking stuff do you have?
like we have the low vision measuring cups,
Oh,
spoons. We have low vision cutting boards that help with color and contrast.
good, good.
And yeah.
So, so something else that I want to bring to your attention, and I don't know if you feel the same way about this, or if you have kind of the same concept of this, but I just have to let you know that for me, as someone who's been blind their whole life, I'm okay with being blind my whole life, because I'm blind my whole life. So the reason I'm saying it is because some blind people, um, how do I even express it to you in English? It's not really that they take offense when you say I'm going to give you a low vision product, but I would like to, if you're open to this, I would like to caution you to please be careful when you market your products, and that when you market them, please do not market them as products for people who are low vision, because it makes it seem like blindness is a problem. So you have to be kind of aware of that. Are you aware of do you understand what I mean?
Oh, when you just described it, I completely understand what you mean. And so I think that's a very important point. Yeah, so I
Yeah,
need
so
to.
maybe, whoever does your marketing work for you, um, and again, once you get into our WhatsApp group, I mean, we have musicians in our group, we have other content creators, specifically marketers. I don't have a marketer, but I know plenty of people who know plenty of very interesting marketers who you should definitely network with. But when you do this, though, you do have to be aware, of the three most important rules in broadcasting or podcasting. Rule number one, audience. Rule number two, audience. Rule number three, audience, right? So you have to be aware of that when you're marketing a product. Are you marketing a product because blindness is a problem, or are you marketing a product because we just happen to need that product in our lives? So it is an important distinction to make. So I would say, well, my store has a lot of cool products that help you. We have these tools to help you lead an independent life. And maybe just don't mention low and vision together, because to me, it's kind of meaningless. I understand what it means, but to me, it's meaningless. And it's not offensive to me. It doesn't bother me. But I just don't just no. It doesn't need to be phrased in that context. But that is so good. That's really, really cool. So are you by any chance 501c?
No, we're not.
Okay. Are you
Now
are
down the
you
road, that's something we may look at. But since we just started,
right?
we're not at this point. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how long that would take to get 501c. I guess probably 6 months to a year, I'm guessing, but I have no idea what's involved in that. Yeah, we have a couple other people who have 501c's. Yeah, you should talk to them for sure in my group. But yeah, really good. Okay, so would you say like, would you say that Vision Loss Solutions is like a profit company, like, or is it just like an organization, kind of a tool that you want to give someone else to help them? Like, how would you kind of paint the picture?
Oh, well, right now we're a very small operation. It's just me, our tech guy, who he actually used to be one of my students when I was in Amarillo, and he also was born blind, and he's
Mm-hmm.
just amazing at technology and has just he's just fantastic. And then we also have a licensed professional counselor that I'm hoping to fill in the gap, like we were referring to earlier, the people that are having some adjustment issues. And so it's just a 3-person team right now. And so our goal is to help people, hopefully fill the gap where the state services aren't able to, cover everyone, or people that maybe don't want to have to wait several months to get services, or maybe they don't qualify. We're hoping to fill in that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would be happy to interview your tech person and your counselor. And I would be happy to put together a playlist for you that celebrates what you do at Vision Loss Solutions. I've done it for another company, and I think it's a really good tool that I can give you. Just free videos that you can send out to people, so that we can keep doing these recordings for you and keep helping people. So I think it's really useful. Definitely, yeah.
Yes, and down the road, we hope to have like a cooking series for people that either have never cooked after their, vision impairment, or maybe they grew up and their parents were really protective and they just never really ventured into the kitchen, on their own. And so we're hoping to do like a kitchen series and then just kind of expand out into other areas, and maybe like have one that's more comedy about things that happen, and so just we're hoping to make it informational, but then also have a avenue where it's just fun.
Cool, cool. Well, I'm really quite impressed. Never really knew that you were only around for 5 weeks. This is really encouraging. Hmm. So good. And what other YouTube channels have you been on, or what other podcasts have you guested with so far?
Oh my gosh, Erin, this is the first one that someone's interviewed me. I did 2 videos, one with Roger, who he was born blind, and then I interviewed. It's called Vision Loss Solution Chronicles, and the second guy I interviewed is in Scotland, and he makes accessible video gaming accessible. And so I interviewed him, and so this is like my third venture out, and so I was very
Well,
nervous to come on.
to nervous. What for? You're a magnificent speaker. You're doing a magnificent job. You should never be nervous when you're on my podcast. Well, I would love it if you would interview me. I would be more than Aaron's Opinion would love to be featured on your channel. That's a really fun activity to go on other people's channels. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind talking to that guy from Scotland either.
Oh
Because
yeah, he told a really funny story that he was.
let me tell you, people from Scotland are hilarious. But yeah, tell the funny story. Yeah, tell me.
Well, and he told a funny story where he got lost one day, and so he was asking. He has a guide dog, and he asked somebody, "How do you know where such and such place is?" And the guy goes, "Oh, I know exactly where that is." And so he goes, "Well, could you give me directions?" And the guy says, "Sure." So he got down on one knee and started giving the directions to the dog about where.
Okay,
It's
I mean
like,
that's kind of I mean, it's kind of cute. I mean, as someone who had a guide dog, I take that in good humor and in good spirit. I
yeah.
think in that case, I think that was genuinely just trying to be cute and silly and funny. I don't think that was meant to be hurtful. I think that was
Oh
genuinely.
no, no, the guy no, and the guy didn't take it like it was mean or hurtful. He got a kick out of it. He just thought it
Yeah,
was funny. Yeah.
yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, that would be just adorable. Yeah, that's definitely in very good humor. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, I would love to have him on. That's really cool. Really cool. Well,
I can
we've
send you his information so you can contact him.
well that would be great. Let's finish one. let's finish one show before we jump all the way across the pond here. But I mean, I've asked you a lot of questions. What are all of the questions you have about Aaron's opinion and me and all of that?
I guess I would, since you've done so many more shows than I have, how do you continue to keep it fresh and interesting and not fall into a pattern where you ask the same questions over and over again?
I mean, I just have to keep interviewing different people. I think I do ask similar questions though, because we have similar themes, but the answers and the stories that people give are very, very interesting and vary greatly from person to person, case to case, story to story, for sure.
Yeah. And then earlier, this is just something I was curious about. You said
Yeah.
that you were a teacher. What do you teach?
English as a second language for students who need to learn like ESL.
Oh, that is interesting.
Extremely.
Yes, because see, in Texas, I got alternatively certified to be a teacher, and every place I went, I was like, "Well, you have really great, a great background, great work experience, but Spanish." And I was like, "No," and they're like, "Okay, we can't hire you because we are only looking for Spanish teachers." And I was like, "Oh," so I wish I knew Spanish. I know you're teaching the English side of it, but
Right. Well, I mean, I do speak French. French is my second language. But most of my students are from all over the world, really.
mhm. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Who's been your favorite guest that you've had on? Like, who did you like? Not, once you started talking to him, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think it would go here. And so, who's been your all-time favorite guest?
Well, you've been magnificent. You've done a magnificent.
Oh,
You've
no.
done a very interesting and a very important recording. Um, I mean, people have said some funny things. People have said some very interesting things over the year. Um, Hard to say.
Yeah. I'm always interested, and I would like to talk more about this because when I'm on the Facebook groups, a lot of people bring this issue up, and I haven't really heard it addressed in a podcast. Not to say that no one has. I
Well,
just
let's. Well, okay, good. So let's address it. What's the issue?
Okay, so I've seen people talking about in on Facebook groups about how maybe they're in a marriage and then they lost their vision and then the dynamics change within the marriage,
Okay.
or
So I by
maybe.
the so I'm single and I live with my parents and my brother. A bit of a long story. So I've never had a girlfriend. Never. I'm not there. I'm not at that point in my life. I do see that a lot. Yeah, I've noticed it. Um, I think it depends on the people, and I think in the end it depends on the couple, and the situation. Um, I don't know. What do you think? What's your opinion or your theory about that?
I don't know if I have a theory so much because, like you said, it would depend on each set couple. But I
Right.
do think it's a topic that probably a lot of people struggle with, um, and people don't really ever talk about it. And so that's what makes me want to talk about it. You know what I mean? Because that is a huge shift. I know when I got cancer, like I was, a big part in the financial aspect of my relationship. And then when I got so ill, I wasn't able to work. The strain that can put on a couple and the way the dynamics change,
Yeah.
it's hard to navigate and know what to do, and I see that other people are struggled with that, and so there is probably no solution. It's just something that it just
There's not.
doesn't seem like people talk about it, but many people struggle with it.
You know what I would tell people is I would say that life is unfair. And a student once told me, once I was speaking with a student from one of the Latin American countries, and he's a doctor. And this is a lot of wisdom. in this conversation. One day I was talking to him and I explained, I'm blind. It's a bit of a long story. I also have other health problems, also have other health needs and all of that. And I was telling him how life is sometimes unfair, even in the United States. And, I have a disability. And he said, Aaron, that might be true. But he said, remember this. And this is a brilliant, brilliant statement for understanding why things happen in our lives. And they happen for this very simple and very interesting reason. The reason is that every person on the planet has ability, and that same person has a disability. And it's up to us to overcome that. So I would say that you have to accept that things are not perfect. And that's why life is interesting, because things are not fair.
Yeah.
So that's what that is. The other thing that I would say, not that I have, I don't know. I'm not going to get into a big discussion about it because I'm not at that point in my life. So it's not professionally fair for me to talk about it too much. But I don't know. I would say maybe, maybe couples should have that should have conversations about that. If this happens, you should have a plan. But it's very difficult to do that, and I shouldn't really say that anyway because I'm not there in my life. But if I was, I would probably say, look, I would probably tell the person or tell the couple, look, if ABC happens, then these are the steps we're going to take. These are the measures that we're going to do. This is how this is going to be handled. Kind of have like a family constitution is what I would say for that. But also, I don't know because I'm not in that position in life.
Yeah. What are some topics that interest you?
All of them, really. Everything from politics to philosophy, to comedy, tech. I've had other YouTubers on this thing before, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, politics is always an interesting one, but how do you navigate that without offending people?
Well,
or getting them mad at you?
Well, sometimes I offend people.
Yeah.
But no, I rarely talk about politics with guests unless they're genuinely interested about it, and then I'll kind of summarize my opinion. But yeah, that is a very interesting topic.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I find that blind people have very strong opinions one way or the other. There's no in the middle anymore, really.
Yeah. Well, and I always find it a little frustrating when the topic could come up and people are like, well, I don't know. I just never really thought about it. And I think, well, how do you not think about it when it affects your life so much?
Well, I think the reason why people give that answer is they're trying to politely say, well, I don't think I should answer that question.
Yeah, see, I'll just come out and say it. Like if someone and I'll like, oh, I don't want to talk about that.
Well, it's the other skill that you have to have as someone with a disability is knowing how to control yourself in those sort of scenarios. And sometimes people ask certain questions not to get answers, but to get reactions.
Yeah. Well,
So that's a problem for people with disabilities. So this is quite an issue, which is why if people start asking, silly questions or questions that they know they maybe shouldn't answer, then all of a sudden I don't have the information, So that's how I would navigate it. But it does heavily depend on the person and heavily depend on the situation. Yeah.
Are you in New Jersey or New York?
Neither. Why? Do I have a New Yorker accent?
Oh, I thought you said that you're where are you then?
I'll tell you off the air. It's a long story. I'll tell you just after I turn off the recorder. You'll understand in a minute. Anyway, well, you've done a great job. I just want to give you the chance to give yourself a plug. How can someone reach out to you and help Vision Loss Solutions if they want to now?
Like if they want to shoot me any advice, if they ever want to be a guest on Vision Loss Solution Chronicles, or you always shoot me an email. My contact information's on the website, and I'd love to hear from you. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm willing to improve. I want to be able to provide the best services possible, so I'm always willing to take back feedback and try to improve. So I'd love to hear from anybody that's watching. um, yeah, shoot me an email.
All right, all right. Did you give me the website in our messenger conversation? Do I have your website?
I believe you do, but it's just www.visionlosssolutions.org.
Okay, visionlosssolutions.org. Okay, guys. Well, if it's all right with you, I'm just going to put a link to your website in the description of the video. How would that be?
Oh, that'd be perfect.
Well, let's go with that. Yeah, you've done a magnificent job. If you want to reach out to me, by the way, since you guys never do, so why am I saying it? I don't know. AaronsOpinion6@gmail.com. You can either tell me that I'm deemed to hell and I'm a horrible person, or since nobody ever says that, that just might mean that I'm just a great, great YouTuber, great broadcaster, great voice actor, I guess. And either way, you can send me an email. AaronsOpinion6@gmail.com. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Patreon. All right? Well, I want to take this time to thank you, Ashley, from Vision Loss Solutions. You've done a great job. And guys, I am sure that Ashley will be interviewing me on her channel very soon. I greatly look forward to that. And I greatly look forward to participating in the Zoom meetups that you guys do. I would love more information. If I'm able to come, if I'm not at work, I would be more than happy to come and talk to anyone who's willing to listen. So
Yes,
if
of
you
course.
if you got people who are willing to listen to what I have to say, I'm going to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, because this is what, and I'm going to help and help and help and help and help, because I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I also wish the world the very best of health. I wish you very good health, of course. And we have a saying, a slogan here at Aaron's Opinion. Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
Very good. That's a great way to end every episode, as we do. Help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.